Thank you so much for coming. I was hoping for a small, intimate session in room 501, and just with a couple of friends and colleagues. So it's nice to see and intimidating so much more interest. Okay, so I think I can start. Can you hear me well? Okay. So some of you might know me, I'm Katja Dowdle, and I'm an EAP lecturer in the Academic Communication Center in UCL. We work with both home students and international students, delivering modules, different workshops, and one-to-one tutorials across the whole academic year and across different faculties. And my background is in theoretical linguistics, but at some point in my career I moved to academic literacies, and I've been teaching it for about 10 years now. And I'm also a doctoral researcher at UCL IOE, and this session today will be focusing on my projects, not on my work as a practitioner. And before I start, I want us to do a bit of self-reflection. Are we good at spontaneous academic formal speaking? Yeah, we don't need to answer now, just keep them in mind, and we can always go back to them in the Q&A session. Can we hold the floor when we're unexpectedly given the floor? Do we always need to write our speech down before delivering it? Do we always need to rehearse formal monologues before delivering them? Do we always need visual aids? Can we trust ourselves to finish a sophisticated line of thoughts without memorizing it in advance? So just keep them in mind, and we can always go back to them later. So the overall aim of the session is for me to present the concept of oral essay under construction, and for us to discuss it at the end. It's part of the ongoing PhD projects. We're just at the very beginning of this journey, and I will tell you a couple of things about my pilot study later and the preliminary findings, and I will also tell you what motivated me to engage in this topic. So, is the essay really dead? We can see that in every decade of the 21st century, academics keep asking this question, not necessarily relating it to the advancements in AI, but just wondering generally about the purpose of the written essay, its affordances, its constraints, and you can see again the recent or the current media hype and academic interest has been mainly fueled by the introduction of ChatGPT last November. And again, we can see a lot of metaphors of death that are being used in relation to essay. The college essay is dead, the essay is dead, but it's not yet buried. Did ChatGPT kill the student essay? Or even if AI kills the essay, I will be a pallbearer at the funeral. So, I know many of us, including me, do not believe that the written essay is dead. But even if we for a second assume that the essay is poorly, dying, or dead already, can we start using metaphors of life? Can we revive it? Can we revitalize it, resuscitate it, resurrect it? Or shall we just acknowledge, together with Richard Andrews, that there's nothing, the essay is doing just fine, and the essay is alive and well? Why? According to Andrews, it is alive and well because of its flexibility, its ability to adapt to different functions. So the question arises, can it adapt to the different modes of delivery? And this is where we start conceptualizing the idea of oral essay. And this is how I define it at the moment, but it's an ongoing journey. Oral essay as spontaneous, a lot to discuss there, structured oral monologue without visual aids or prepared manuscripts, where students are given the floor, an uninterrupted stretch of time to orally construct a critical academic argument combining their own stance with expert ideas. I believe that this concept has been underexplored in higher education. And I won't show it for a second. The conceptualization is still ongoing, but there are already certain things that I am certain about, or certain about so far, and there are still many questions, more questions than answers, to be fair. So in my conceptualization, I am intending to remove performance aspects. No standing, no microphone required, body language irrelevant. We're focusing on articulating ideas, building on the views of others, and constructing that academic argument. Eye contact can also be very questionable. A lot of us look up or look down when we try to formulate a complex argument. Peter Elbow, Professor of English, acknowledges in one of his writings that he often closes his eyes when trying to construct a complicated thought. Let's think about our neurodivergent students who often avoid eye contact and who struggle with voice projection and body language. So just keep that in mind. What is also I'm certain about is that I am aiming it at everyone, home students and international students. There are a lot of questions still that will hopefully be answered towards the end of the research journey. How can we frame it? Can it exist as an assessment? If it can, is it assessment of learning, for learning, or as learning? Can it be just a skill development task, exercise in academic literacy, assignment, scaffolding tool, or means by which learning could take place? Communication genre, speech event, reading into speaking, reading mediated speaking. So that was introduced to me yesterday by Chris Smith. I'm not sure if he's in the audience, so thank you, Chris Smith. A new one, maybe it can be that. And we are not sure yet whether we will need marking criteria to judge its performance, or shall we call it assessment rubrics, rating scales, learning outcomes, or just desirable goals. So these are the questions that will be answered with the help of empirical data. So this is the intention. So the empirical data will support our decisions. Just again, very, very quickly, I'll go through some of the foundation theories that we're basing it on. So we're drawing from some of the theories by Mercer and Juergens, which can help us to position it within the existing frameworks of oracy and oral assessment. For example, if we look at Mercer's Cambridge Oracy Skill Framework, that is apparently used widely now in secondary schools in the UK, but Marian Herron is still saying, why aren't we using it in higher education? So if we look at their framework, we can see that, okay, maybe in oral essay, we can prioritize cognitive elements and linguistic elements over physical elements and socio-emotional elements. If we look at Juergens' dimensions, again, it can help us define the level of interaction. There's no interaction here in oral essay, the level of structure, etc. Wingate's essay framework, or Wingate's idea about argumentation as an overarching concept, as an umbrella term that includes everything, and positioning, and synthesizing, and signposting, and everything else that we teach, that can be taken as a potential construct of an oral essay. Beautiful ideas by Erving Goffmans in his lecture that was actually delivered as a lecture once and then was written. He talks about fresh talk and memorization and reading aloud. So this is what we usually engage in. In oral essay, we're trying to research the feasibility of fresh talk. Goffman acknowledges that fresh talk is often an illusion, and a lot of so-called fresh talk, as he says, is not as fresh as it seems. A lot of phrases are memorized or rehearsed. Peter Elbow's ideas about speaking and writing characteristics and their fluidity and interconnectedness, again, can help us talk about how to reconstruct a typically or a traditionally written format into an oral one. Before I move to the pilot study, just very briefly, the motivators. So what motivated me to engage in this topic? Well, first of all, my professional experience. Years ago, when I was teaching students, I noticed that they felt less detached from the written essay, from the essay task, when I asked them to talk through their arguments, or to talk to me through their argument. And the oral mode seemed to create that feeling of ownership and the feeling of responsibility in the way they structured their ideas, in the way they presented their thoughts. Students seem to identify themselves with their words when speaking, while in writing, using Walter Wrong's famous words, the knower was indeed separating themselves from the known. And I think this reflection, this observation, is beautifully reflected in those two phrases. The first one was from Jürgen's research. One of his students said, "I own the words I speak more than I own the words that I write." And the second phrase is a Latin proverb, "Omnia me mecum porto." All that is mine, I carry with me. There. And this reflection of mine coincided with the appeal in academic literature to continue diversifying assessment, so to broaden the assessment diet, not necessarily to supplement anything, but not necessarily to remove something, but just to supplement it with something else. And also the appeal, and you can see the names there, yeah, Marian Heron, Mercer, the appeal to put oracy in higher education on research agenda. So oracy, the term was coined by Wilkinson in 1965, also includes listening, but we're only focusing on in oral essay, on the oral aspect. And we know that oracy is skewed by deprivation and privilege. We know, or we believe, or some believe that it can represent Bourdieu's cultural capital. And it is also believed to have potential to be a useful tool as oracy, as competence, and as oracy for learning, for thinking, for constructing knowledge, for developing your thoughts. And of course, the introduction of sophisticated AI writing tools only solidified my intention to engage with this topic and to empirically explore the idea of oral essay. Pilot study. I already mentioned earlier that it's part of the ongoing PhD project where I'm using design-based research methodology, DBR, not very popular in the UK yet. So if you're interested, come and join our reading group in UCL. It's a bit of an advertisement. The pilot study was just an exploratory stage. I wanted to listen to students' voices. I wanted to trial a very simplistic, rough draft of an oral essay, and I wanted to see whether it can illuminate potential features of an oral essay. So you can see 4 research questions. How is the task of oral essay interpreted by students? What are students' attitudes towards an essay task when it's implemented in an oral format? How do students characterize their performance? And which features of the written essay are exhibited in the oral essay? The sample was small, 7 students doing masters in one of the UK universities. All of them were international. It was convenience, non-probability, small sample. I used to teach them, but at the point of data collection, I was not their teacher. We tried to minimize power imbalance, so participation was purely voluntary, and it was done outside their classroom time. The oral essay task itself, they were given a small number of quotes, experts' ideas, and they were asked to synthesize and incorporate them into their own oral arguments. We were using mixed methods of data collection, so we're drowning in data now, of course. That's why the findings are preliminary. So we were observing their oral performance, recording it. It was all audio recorded, and I was also taking their notes and photographing their notes and researching their notes. Half an hour semi-structured interview with each of them after their oral performance. You see, I'm using this word performance as a habit, don't I? Yeah. After their speech, because I said earlier I want to remove that element of performance. And then, of course, background questionnaire and self-rating scale, again, that we're still exploring. How do you think they did? Well, no one ran away, no one collapsed, despite anxiety, despite what we call stage fright, or CA, communication apprehension, or glossophobia. Yeah, there's another one. Everyone attempted to do the task, but I wanted to show you something. When I wanted to print out the transcripts to show them to my supervisor, there was a problem with my blank ink nozzles. And they were clogged. And we decided to keep that because it powerfully represents students' struggles, doesn't it? Of course, as expected, there were speech disfluencies, all of them. Repetition, repair, false start, field pause. But this picture really draws our attention to the level of that struggle and potentially suggesting listeners strain.
What does the blue represent?
Blue represents repair, repetition, false start. It's quite hard to see it there. Yeah, I didn't expect you to read that. Just enjoy the number of field pauses. And then, of course, it was removed. So that's what the original transcript looked like. And then I tried to remove all the disfluencies. And what is interesting is that all the students, it was totally unprompted because they didn't know how long they should prepare for, how long they should speak for. There were no restrictions at all. It was totally explorative. All of them, in the end, produced something between 400 and 600 words. And then we started doing genre analysis, again, just attempting to analyze the oral essay transcript and see what features from the traditional written essay are present there and which features would be absent, what new features would occur there. So again, long process, and I'm still revisiting it again and again and again, calling it genre analysis. So these are the preliminary findings. We saw a range of task interpretations and strategies that were adopted to successfully produce an oral argument. Different time taken to prepare. I won't tell you yet how long, you will see why later. Different time taken to deliver the oral essay, different note-taking strategies. Only one student out of 7 did write the whole manuscript. And their speech did not have any speech disfluencies, of course, because they were just reading their manuscript. And this is what Goffman calls hyperfluency. And he believed in his time that it can only occur when we read, and it can never occur in oral, fresh talk. And there is nothing to be scared of. Speech disfluencies are to be expected. And the preliminary genre analysis showed that, well, despite those speech disfluencies, the transcripts of oral narratives showed recognizable genre features of an essay or of a written essay, suggesting maybe potential of the oral essay to be a measure of students' critical argumentation skills. What is also interesting, that students, totally unprompted by me, by any of my questions during the interviews, started talking about oral essay, about oracy, not just as competence, but as oracy for learning. Oracy or oral essay for processing and retaining information, oracy for acquiring knowledge, oracy for learning to be persuasive, etc., etc., etc. It wasn't just oracy for developing their oral skills. They did acknowledge the struggles and they did acknowledge the challenges. Only one student out of 7 was completely happy with their performance, but despite that, they believed that they would like those skills to be developed. I'm using skills carefully because I know it's a contested word in our field. I wanted to show you something. Students' thoughts, a lot of students' thoughts reflected the current theories. Have a look at them. One student said, well, it's like I can read an essay, an oral essay. It's like I can ride a bicycle or take a taxi. It's the same. Both are vehicles to transport something. which reflects the ideas by Halliday and Elbow that there is interacting relationship between speech and writing. Look at the second one, memorization as a useful learning tool. Again, discussed a lot in the literature, Booker, Goffman, for example. So I asked them how they would design this task to facilitate spontaneity and prevent memorization. Participant 1, well, we cannot speak fluently if we don't memorize some important knowledge. Participant 2, if I have good memory, I will use it. If I can remember all of this, I definitely will remember it, but I can't. And the last one always makes me emotional for some reason. Remember that sentence from Jürgen's data, I own the words that I speak more than I own the words that I write. So have a look what one of my participants said. When you need to write a 2,000-word essay, you need a lot of information, and some of the information you just even don't know what the meaning is, but you still put that in the essay. You just want to make your words, make enough words, yeah. So I feel this way is a better way to learn information. It's not that much, and it's very appropriate, and you can learn, and then it becomes your information. It becomes yours, yeah. But the written essay, no. Last slide. What's next? No claims to generalizability. In case someone was wondering, we're hoping for potential transferability or so-called ecological validity. Is it applicable to real-life context? Is it applicable to authentic context? And to answer this question, we are going to not just test oral essay designs in authentic context. I'm planning to work with subject lecturers, disciplinary lecturers, and co-design oral essay tasks. I'm planning to target different faculties, arts, humanities, STEM, social sciences, see how it will be changing. So design-based research is slightly similar to action research. There will be several iterations of design, test, reflect, redesign, go to the next iteration. And at the moment, the aim is not to focus on impact or effectiveness too early, but just to explore in an interpretivist kind of way oral essay appeal, relevance, consistency, practicality, local viability, and broader institutionalization. Okay, well, thank you for giving me the floor. And of course, it wasn't spontaneous.